Hi everyone, and welcome back to Woman Meets Motherhood. So we are here today with one of our special episodes. So today is Golda meets Kate, and Kate has so kindly come here to talk to me today about her story. And this episode is about conception. And so I want you guys to imagine you're a woman. Obviously you get married, you know, you're excited, you're going through your time with your husband, and people start asking about kids, and you know, for everyone, the normal woman, that's a normal thing to have. You know, you think first comes marriage, then comes the baby, but then when things aren't happening naturally, you then decide to go and, you know, search and inquire with doctors and consultant as to what's the issue. It's so amazing to see, you know, modern medicine has moved to an area where we can have such things as IVF and allow and help women to conceive. But you know, the topic of IVF for me is something that's not delved into enough, and I didn't know anything about it before hearing Kate's story. So I'm really excited that we can hear her story, hear about her experiences and everything that's gone into that, and understand what it means to as a woman to go through that process, and even as a wife and now mother as well. So thank you very much, Kate, for joining me today.
You're welcome.
I'm really excited for you to hear your story. And so just first off, it would be great just to hear about you and at a high level what your experiences have been with around conception.
Well, my husband and I got married in 2013 after 11 years together. And I don't think we ever really thought about what age we would try for kids. I was 32 when we got married, and we started trying straight away. Mm-hmm. There was nothing that led me to believe we'd have any problems. Mm. And then about a year into trying, I realised that something wasn't right. Suddenly my periods became a little bit erratic. Went to the doctors. They told me everything was okay. Just had some very minimal NHS testing. Mm. Told me everything was okay. I just knew it wasn't. Mm. I had private healthcare with my work, mm-hmm. and actually that covered fertility investigations.
Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah, it was great actually. And I don't think a lot of people know that a lot of your time, your health insurance at work will cover investigations. It doesn't often cover treatment. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I went and got an appointment at a local clinic in Croydon and saw a great consultant, and he diagnosed me with polycystic ovarian syndrome.
What does that mean?
So it basically means that I have loads of cysts around my ovaries and I just don't ovulate every month. Mm. My consultant explained it in a really great way, that he said, imagine your ovaries are like when you're on the tube and it's really, really packed, and the door's open and everybody tries to get off and they can't. Okay. He said that's like your ovaries. They're so packed with eggs that there's not enough room for one to grow and mature enough to be released to make a baby.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of a really good way of explaining it. So he basically put me on drugs to help me produce one mature follicle every month. Mm-hmm. And we started on that journey. I did 3 rounds, I think, on a drug called letrozole, which actually is a drug treated for women with breast cancer. But through research, they found that actually it helps induce ovulation.
And how did that drug, even before we move on to what it did and how it helped, how did it actually... Did you find it gave you any personal side effects? Or
I mean, it wasn't too bad. I mean, I guess you probably I felt a little bit headachy, a bit hormonal, because I think that's what it's doing. Mm-hmm. But actually, I think I was very lucky, because I've since heard that a lot of women have suffered with quite a few side effects. But for me, you take it day 2 to day 5 of your cycle. Mm-hmm. That went pretty quick, and I didn't really notice anything. So I think I was quite lucky. Mm-hmm. And then after that, after 3 cycles, they were all unsuccessful. Mm-hmm. We moved on to IUIs, which is an insemination. Okay. So exactly the same. You take the same drugs, but then they literally follow your ovulation. And just before you ovulate, then my husband's sperm was inseminated into my uterus to try and time ovulation perfectly.
Oh, wow.
And we did that 3 times, and unfortunately it didn't work.
And just with that... How intensive was that? So were you constantly in the hospital, constantly at clinics?
Yeah, I think when you do an IUI, you're a lot more monitored. And even with when I did the letrozole, because they want to make sure you don't produce too many follicles so that you don't end up having multiple pregnancies, you are probably being scanned every few days around ovulation. And with the IUI, very much so, because you don't want to miss that crucial time. Yeah. And they like to, you know, do the insemination when you get 12 hours after you've had a surge on one of those ovulation kits.
Wow.
So it is a lot. And actually, when you're working, even just simple, less invasive treatments like that can be really time consuming, and they do play around with your emotions. And so I think even at that point, it was quite overwhelming. And when you're kind of 7 cycles in and it's not working, it becomes a bit frustrating. So I think we had quite an honest conversation with our consultant. And I think the next thing we moved on to was like a mini IVF cycle, where not only did I think they gave me injections to try and produce more than one follicle, so that would increase my chances. And I think maybe I produced 2 or 3, but I still didn't fall pregnant. And I think with that time as well, they actually gave me a drug to help release the egg so they could time it perfectly. They call it a trigger shot. But again, it just didn't work.
And how long had this journey been so far?
I think so every month we were doing treatment. So I think we were probably 9-10 months in at that point. And I think I remember going to see my consultant after like the 8th or 9th cycle, and he just looked at me and he said, "You're done, aren't you?" And I just said, "Yeah, I can't keep doing this every month. It's so disheartening." And there was a financial implication as well, because at this point we'd moved on from the investigations. We were now paying $1,000+ each month, and it starts adding, and you start thinking we should just pay for an IVF cycle. It gives you a much higher success rate of pregnancy. But then my consultant was slightly worried because of my polycystic ovaries. You have a much higher risk of, overstimulation, which is quite dangerous. So I had to be monitored a lot more closely. But we all agreed IVF was the next step. He said it would increase my chances, and that's all we wanted. Really.
And before you got to that point of deciding that was the next step, how did your body feel? Even though you had been through 9 months of constant
I think things. I was also a bit aware that I was pumping synthetic drugs into my system every month, and no one really wants to do that. And I'm not saying I was the most healthiest person in the world, but I didn't really drink, I didn't smoke, I didn't like the idea that every month I was having to take a drug that was actually for women with breast cancer. And you start worrying in years to come, is that something that's
side effects?
Because IVF is still only 30 years old.
So that's relatively long in the medical
community. But for you still think in years to come, what repercussions could that come? So and also I did think with IVF that was going to be much more brutal. That was going to be much harder, but so much more worth it, because the chances went from 25% each month success to 50%.
Oh wow.
And for us, that was all we needed to hear, really.
So you touched on the financial implication. How did you go about choosing? Like, you probably had to sit down with your husband and say, right, we want to do this again next month. How, can we afford? Can we afford it?
We're very lucky with my husband and his job, and we had the funds to do it. I mean, there wasn't an unlimited supply of money, but when it was just kind of we were doing the IUIs, it was doable. When we started discussing figures with IVF, that was a little bit different. And we kind of worked out, well, we probably could give ourselves a couple of goes. And my parents had said, well, we'll pay for one as well. And we knew we probably could bank in 2 or 3 cycles. Because that's the thing with IVF, usually your chances are 1 within 3 cycles is going to work. So in our heads, we were trying to think, okay, well, if it's going to cost between X and Y, we know we can probably do it 2 or 3 times with the help of our parents. But it was a massive concern, because you do think you're just married, you've just bought a house, and actually you start thinking, how long is this going to go on for? 5, 6, 7 years. At what point are we going to say, well, no, we just can't do this anymore?
And it's so for me, like, eye-opening to see that women go through this, and it's for the woman who is able to conceive naturally. You don't think so. For myself and my husband, we didn't think, okay, we want to have a baby. How much it's going to cost us even before getting pregnant. That was never thought about. But in your case, that had to be thought about. That's actually your first thought. Can we afford for this process to start?
Yeah, definitely. And we did say, right, we can't do this year because when the money needs to go there. Like I say, we were very lucky with my husband, and he has a good job, but there wasn't an endless supply of money. And it was a case of we had to sacrifice certain things, but we would have done. And I actually spoke to my husband about it and said, I'm willing to go as far as we need to make this work. But he was a bit more rational and a bit, well, the money isn't there, Kate, to do that. And that's a massive part of it as well.
So you've now decided you're going to do IVF. What processes do you have to take with your consultant? What are the steps that in order to do that?
Quite a long. I was on a long protocol, which suits my polycystic ovaries as well. There is a short and a long, and the whole process is around 6 weeks. But my consultant also wanted me to do something called an endometrial scratch the month before you start. And it's exactly what it says. It's not very pleasant, but they scratch the uterus They insert a catheter and they scratch the uterus to almost create a little bit of a bleed.
Yeah.
And the theory is, well, not the theory, the research shows that by doing that, it induces a bleed. And once you've had that bleed, it makes the uterus a bit more sticky.
Okay.
So that when you do finally do IVF, the embryo has a better chance of implanting.
Okay.
Research around it is still relatively new, but it does increase your chances. So whatever it was an extra £200, £250. So we were happy to pay it. So I had that done the month before. And then as soon as my bleed started, I started injections, which was called down regulations. And you inject yourself every 12 hours. So mine was 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. And so therefore you can't really go out for dinner or do anything because you have to inject yourself. And it was literally syringe, pulling up, injecting myself.
Wow.
So I didn't really, that's quite hard because you kind of do have to make plans to not go out, 8 o'clock's a bit of a time, dinner plans. It sounds, I was shooting up in toilets in restaurants because I had to do it. And that's not very nice.
Yeah.
And you always feel a bit conscious because you've got needles and drugs on you. And you always kind of think, if I'm ever pulled over, because that's what they say as well, wherever you are, you make sure you have your drugs with you. Because if you get stuck anywhere or you get broken down, you cannot miss that time slot.
And is that impactful on what happens later, basically?
Definitely, yeah. And the pressure of that, 8 a.m, 8 p.m. every day.
For how long?
For 2 weeks is the first
Even
lot.
that.
Yeah.
Even taking a pill every day for me, I find it hard.
Yeah, exactly. And I had I remember once just missing it by 20 minutes and being in floods of tears and ringing my hospital. And they were like, it's fine, it's not going to make any difference. But I think if you miss longer than that, I think it can have a massive impact.
Wow.
And then you go in for a scan after 2 weeks and they check that your lining is completely thin. And then they do what they call the stimulation phase. So then you start a third injection or a fourth injection on top of the 2 that you're still doing. And that is then helping you produce the follicles. And the aim, I think, is with most IVF is to get as many as safely possible because you don't want to overstimulate.
Yeah.
And so I think I injected for a couple of weeks and you're having scans all the time to check how many are growing. Yeah. And you look about 4 months pregnant because you're just, on a monthly basis, you probably only have 1-2 mature follicles, if that. Yeah. Whereas I was having, I had 22 that were collected at the end. So your stomach is huge. And I remember going in for my egg collection and it was so painful. I felt like I was about 4 months pregnant. And that's the aim of it, is to try and get as many follicles as you can.
You got 22.
So I went in and it's, you go into hospital, I was sedated. And that was the other thing, I was just sedated. So I was very aware they have to pull the eggs out from your, they give you a trigger shot. And then literally your consultant goes in and gets the eggs out. And I was only sedated. And I remember it was really uncomfortable. And I think now it's a bit different in some cases. I think you can be put under. But I was just sedated and I was very aware of what was going on. And and then you're wheeled out and they tell you, and then literally the funniest part of it was my husband had to they were put into an incubator and my embryologist was actually in Harley Street. So then my husband had to get on the train with the incubators, all our eggs. And then but halfway to the journey to he was actually getting a cab. Halfway through, the traffic was so bad. He told the cab to divert and he jumped on the train with them because you've only got a limited time to get to the embryologist and then he has to do his part and then the eggs are fertilised. Wow. But it's kind of a 6-week process all in all, really, from start to finish. But I always think that's quite funny, hilarious that my husband was on this train.
With your baby at
with our son, which is such a mad thing to think about.
So they do that insemination outside of your body. And then what happens?
So then you have a really anxious 24-hour phone call to say how many embryos have actually fertilised. We had 22 eggs collected. We had a phone call the next day to say 11 had fertilised. So that just shows you actually, doesn't matter how many eggs. The actual mature follicles, there was only 11. Yeah. And then they give you another phone call 24 hours later to tell how they're developing. And the whole point is that you're either going to do a 3-day or a 5-day transfer. And you kind of want to get to blastocyst phase, which is day 5. And we had a phone call to say there was about 7 or 8, and she was very hopeful that we would get to day 5. And then it goes a bit quiet and you just don't hear anything until literally the day before when they ring you up to tell you to come in and have it done.
So this is a waiting game.
Massively.
You're literally waiting by the phone.
Yeah, but we were fairly confident. We knew there was 7 or 8 that were looking really good. I was still massively stimulated, and I was having some scans just to check I wasn't overstimulated, because that can also ruin your chances. They can't then do an embryo transfer if you have that. Luckily, I was fine, and we went in on day 5 and had an embryo transfer. Just one. I was under 35. They tend to just do that under 35. And also, my egg quality was really good.
And what do they do with the others?
So we decided, then you hope that you can have some frozen ones as a bit of a backup plan, so you don't have to go through that whole process again.
To mature them and so on. And
yeah,
so forth.
Exactly. You wouldn't have to have eggs collected again. Yeah. So and we were lucky, I think 4, on the day there was 5 embryos. 1 they implanted, which was my son, turned out to be my son Austin. Then there was 4 left. 1, I think we got a phone call the next day saying it hadn't made it any further. So we froze 3, I think, over that. Yeah.
And even of all the IVF what people have been through IVF, and I've heard their stories, I don't think I've ever heard of a story where the first egg they implant, it becomes the one that becomes your child.
Yeah, I know, we were so lucky.
Like I think it probably is rare, and you probably know more than me, but after going through all of that, first you're first trying to deal with the polycystic ovaries and that, and then choosing to do IVF. It was a hope, and I'm sure a big hope that it would work.
If I'm honest, I didn't think it was going to work. Wow. I was so despondent after having so many failed cycles of treatment, and I thought, do you know what? We probably won't work first time, but we'll keep going. Yeah. And actually, if you meet my son now, you realise why it worked.
And
determined. They definitely picked the strongest embryo, because he is just. Yeah, it's crazy. And obviously they're graded. They will pick the strongest one and put them back in. And of the 3 I had remaining, I think they were all quite good quality. But honestly, if you met him, you kind of make sense. You kind of think, I can see why you were meant to be here. You're so strong. So
that's amazing. So Austin arrived, and then I know the story took a different turn.
Yeah, he was 11 months old, and I found myself pregnant naturally. And it was
So, Kate, explain to us what that means, because you told us in the beginning that you had polycystic ovaries, and that meant you could not ovulate naturally.
And then I was breastfeeding for 8-9 months exclusively, so I didn't have any periods. And then I stopped breastfeeding exclusively around 9 months, and I was kind of waiting for my period to come back, and it did. And I had one period. Then we went away on holiday to Dubai, as you do, and then literally I came back 2 weeks later and I was pregnant. Wow. And it was literally the first month, after stopping breastfeeding. I'd had one period. And then since then I've read or seen that actually you're at your most fertile the month you stop breastfeeding. Mother Nature almost says, you're ready to
bring another
produce
child
again. Yeah. And I actually... so completely shocked.
Wow.
Didn't even think.
How did they explain that to you though? That you had polycystic ovaries and that meant you couldn't conceive naturally, but that you just did.
And it is very common, especially once you've had a baby. It does tend to sort out a lot of the problems. Wow. And I think it's very common now that people do often experience that. I have a friend personally who's now got a second baby naturally. First one was IVF. Wow. And I did in my head think actually we might be quite lucky in that way, because the polycystic ovaries won't stop you from, my mum has it and conceived naturally. Oh, okay. It doesn't, it's just, it lessens your chances because you don't ovulate every month. Okay. So, we found ourselves naturally pregnant. And if I'm honest, I was really shocked because Austin was only 11 months old, just trying to get my head, 2 under 2, trying to get my head around it. And my husband was super shocked. And then, but I just knew something wasn't right.
And I just want to stop you there just for a second, because we've spoken about over the season, we've spoken to those who've had miscarriages, those who've had even issues in their pregnancy, and so many women have said to us, we found out we were pregnant, or a few weeks in, and we just knew something wasn't right. Yeah. And it's so powerful to see the intuition that a woman has, like she just knows.
Well, when Austin was implanted and I found out I was pregnant, I didn't worry at all. Yeah. I knew he was meant. I said to my husband, there's still a really high chance of miscarriage, especially with polycystic ovaries. Yeah. But we had a scan at 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and I just didn't. I said it's fine, everything's gonna be fine. Yeah. I just knew it. And with this one, I didn't have any more or less symptoms. I just knew something wasn't right. And I said to my husband, let's book an early scan. With Austin, we had one at 6 weeks. It was lovely to see the heartbeat. Yeah. And we booked a private clinic. We didn't go back to our hospital or our consultant. We just we just found a local clinic in Oxted. And and then they just, should have been around 7.5 weeks and there was no heartbeat. And she said, you're measuring around 5 weeks, 6 days. And she said, it could be that you've miscalculated your dates. But I just knew, looking at an empty screen and having seen my son at 6 weeks, I was like, no, And then unfortunately, I think 5 or 6 days later, it was a real killer actually. It was just after Mother's Day.
Wow.
I had a really heavy bleed, and I went to EPU, which is the early pregnancy unit, and everything had gone. There was nothing left. And it was awful, because at that point as well, you feel a bit guilty because we were a bit still in shock of the pregnancy.
So it's like joy but grief.
Yeah, and it was all a bit, and it all happened so quickly, and we were still shocked that we were expecting a baby naturally. And
where did you guys choose to go from there? What did you guys?
And then I think, look, in hindsight, it probably wasn't the right decision, but I had a massive need to replace, and I just wanted to be pregnant again. And I knew we had these frozen embryos, and I said to my husband, how do you feel about doing a frozen embryo transfer? And he was like, yeah, whatever you want to do, whatever you feel comfortable doing. And so I had the first miscarriage in April, and we did an embryo transfer in September, so went through the whole process again. The only difference is you don't collect the eggs, because obviously, but I did all the down regs, all the injections. I had the endometrial scratch beforehand. And we transferred an embryo in September, and I knew I was pregnant straight away. And then, but within 5 days, I started bleeding again, and I just knew it was all over. And in hindsight, was it a bit too soon after the first miscarriage? Probably. I don't know if mentally, physically. I think your body does a very good job at telling you it's just not ready to do something. And I know, obviously, there might have been something wrong with the embryo, whatever the reasons are. But sometimes I just think as well, maybe I just wasn't ready to do it. And part of me is a little bit like, why did we do that so soon? But looking back on it now, and I have spoken to many people that have had miscarriages, you're longing to try and replace that
how
grief.
To deal with the grief,
is to have another baby. And I almost in some ways wish we didn't have those embryos available to us, because
you would have just waited
and given a bit more time. And then so unfortunately that happened straight after. So I think it was 5 months. We had it was 5 months and we had 2 miscarriages.
Wow. Where are you now?
So we left it after that, and even my consultant said to me, go away, Kate, I don't want to see you for a few months. Like, you need to just deal with what's gone on and get your body healthy, and also focus on my son. I felt so bad. He was that second year of his life, he dealt with me having to go through so much, and fears that I wasn't as present as I should have been. And I mean, he's fine, and I even spoke to his nursery about it. I was like, is he okay? And they're like, he's fine, he's resilient to it. That's all in your head that you're worrying about him. But it was important to just step away and focus on him and be a mum to him. He was still such a little baby, and I felt really selfish that I was trying to give him a sibling, but the whole time I was probably ignoring him. I mean, I probably wasn't, but it's how I felt. So we've just spent the last few months just taking time off, and I think we'll think about doing an embryo transfer in the next month or so.
I'm glad you guys are in a space where you can still do that. And I'm glad you're going to just take it forward. At the end of the day, children are a blessing. So however they come, they come.
Definitely.
But you have Austin.
Yes, definitely. And you start to believe, and you realise that. I'm a great believer in it's all about the timing. Austin was meant to be here, and I know the next one, it will be exactly the same. And I feel confident with that. I really do.
Oh, that's I'm actually so happy to see. And that's actually the essence of Women Meets Motherhood, that things happen. Everything doesn't always go to plan. But things happen when they are meant to happen. Austin's a clear example of that.
I couldn't believe that more. Having gone through everything with Austin completely. I do. And I do believe it will happen. I feel like it will be when rather than if, which wasn't the case with Austin. So. What's
one piece of advice you'd give to a woman currently either deciding to try and go to IVF, or they're going through it and haven't been through it, the feelings, the emotions, the roller coaster? What would you say to them? What would you tell them?
I mean, it's really hard, and if someone had told me to do it going through it, I probably would have not been able to do it. But just don't put your life on hold. Life has to go on, because I have a few regrets going through a lot of my treatment. I didn't do things. I didn't go out on nights out because in fear of drinking might ruin my chances, or I massively put my life on hold, and it consumed every part of me. And you can't live like that, because eventually it just brings you down. So I'd just say, whatever treatment you're going through, life has to carry on alongside it. And if you can do that, you keep a bit of a balance. And because it's always devastating when a cycle fails, but if life can carry on alongside it, happy times as well as bad times, it kind of gets you through it a little bit more.
Thank you, Kate. This has been so good. I really appreciate that. You've spoken so much and so in depth about IVF. I've learned so much personally, and I hope you guys have learned so much as well. we will be back again speaking about different topics. But if there is anything you've been through, either if you want help or us to put you in touch with, helpful resources, we'll do our best. So just contact us on womanmeetsmotherhood@gmail.com, and we can do our best to help you. But I'm very, very, very grateful to Kate for coming to speak to us today about your story. So enlightening, so helpful, and so insightful.
So thank you.
Thank you very much, and we'll remember to comment, like, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.